What else is being done to alleviate this problem? Although they have already decided on departmental budget cuts, the administration continues to search for alternative means of cutting costs.
We're trying to look at virtually everything. We're looking at ways in which we can do a lot of our things in the administration with fewer people. We're looking at ways in which we can attract outside funds that are not governmental funds, such as fundraising, etc. We're looking at ways in which we can generate monies inside.
In fact, of the 5.5% cut that the faculty is taking this year, we found all but about 2% of it without touching departmental budgets.
And how have you found other money to be able to do that?
Well, some of it came from our slight increase in enrollment that we had this year and that we're continuing to project for next year. Some of it came because we had some costs that were coming to an end. For example, we had some non-renewable appointments that are finishing this year, so we no longer have the cost of those. Some came from administrative savings. In this office, for example, we've had 2 people who have resigned or retired, and so far we've not filled their positions. So a number of costs like that we were able to get at the faculty office have saved a direct cut on the departments.
You know, with the bureaucracy of such a public institution, there's certainly, a lot of things that can be looked at, and the Board of Trustees has sort of tasked a few task forces to sort of go out and see what ways that they can cut costs. For example, on travel, right now when, a professor or faculty or someone from the university needs to go on travel for university business, they'll sort of just book it and then, expense it later on. Whereas if you centralize all that to a central location and use sort of that volume travel buying, like that can cut costs, and they're saying just over $1 million a year. And the same thing for office supplies as well, if it's all bought through a central location. And so, if you're saving, upwards of $1 or $2 million a year that way, then there's other ways that can be looked at. There can be a long way to sort of cutting back on how much cuts need to happen.
Business, for example, is planning to grow its way out of it. They're going to increase the number of programs. They have programs for which there isn't a limitation on tuition, so they can use the revenue from those programs to offset the cuts. I gather the Faculty of Education is in a somewhat similar situation. They have revenue generating opportunities that will offset the cuts there. Applied science, I think, is the faculty that's probably most like ours and is facing similar sorts of problems.
71% of the university's operating expenses on a yearly basis are made up of salary and compensation. And all this money going to professors, right? They're under their collective bargaining agreement. They're getting anywhere of a salary increase of about anywhere from 5 to 7% per year without any sort of performance-based review. That's really where a lot of these problems are coming from, it's the increases in faculty salaries. I think that there's some interest from certain faculty saying, okay, well, we're sort of seeing our salaries increase, but the quality of the spaces we're teaching and the quality of our education we're being offered is lowering. So I would hope that there's interest in the future of certain faculty thinking maybe we should reopen our agreement and sort of look at maybe just having our salaries increase at cost of living until we sort of ride out this period of economic downturn.
We still need revenue generation where we can. The logical one might be to raise fees.
Tuition costs won't be immediately affected because our tuition is regulated by the government and has been for the past several years. So for several years, the fees for first-year students have gone up by 4.5% and for upper-year students by 4%. Unless the government changes that, and the current plan comes to an end, I think, at the end of next year. So that will depend on what the government does.
We have been very adamant that, particularly at the undergraduate level, that whatever increases there are on an annual basis, that they be capped and limited. We've kept to that. I don't see that changing, but we do live in a world where a tremendous amount has changed over the last 4 to 5 months, so it's very difficult to predict what will happen in the future, particularly if these tough economic times continue the way they are.
We're right up against the provincial ceiling on that one, and we realize that given the state of the economy, it's going to be even tougher for students to get summer jobs this year. So that really isn't an option.
I think there was a study out the other day that suggested the university tuition fees had to go up by 25%. And this was almost portrayed as if it was a government study. I can tell you that no such study exists from the government viewpoint. It may very well have been done by an independent think tank, etc. I don't ascribe to those numbers at all. I don't think that's necessary. I saw from reading this morning's paper for example, that the principal at Queen's has already taken measures in order to deal with some of the shortfalls that he thinks that may arise during this coming year, and I think that's a good idea.
Look at the budget options that Queen's has that it doesn't seem to be willing to consider, recognizing the fact that Queen's has the highest credit rating of any university in Canada. It's got an endowment that was close to $500 million before. There's obviously been a bit of a hit recently. It has properties like the Castle in England and the prison for women here in Kingston. It has resources that other universities don't have.
We are looking at ways in which we might use some of our assets and leverage those. But the real estate market is also down at this point, so there's not a heck of a lot that you can do there. And I think one of the things which a lot of people don't seem to realize is that this 3-year plan is still going to leave us with an accumulated deficit of $17 or $18 million. And we have to figure a way in which we're going to get out of that in the years after the 3 years. So going into any more debt really is mortgaging our future. We're just not in the position to be able to do that and maintain quality.
What action has the provincial government taken to help the schools out with this financial crisis?
To this point, surprisingly little, because their revenues have basically fallen off the edge of a cliff. We've been told consistently that the provincial economy is in trouble. We're all waiting with bated breath for the provincial budget, which will happen probably in the first 2 or 2.5 weeks of March, and then we'll know if we're going to get any assistance over and above what we now have.
Right now, when you look at the funding structure of the university, the amount of money from the provincial government, it is sort of coming into the university slightly increasing, but our expenses are increasing at a much greater rate. So, there's not enough money there.
It'd be hard to speculate as to what's in the budget. It goes without saying that we're in for tough economic times. It also goes without saying that the government has decided to go into a deficit situation. I would be very surprised if, for example, the level of funding for universities and colleges would not be at the same level as last year. That's number one. I don't know what additional funding there will be. Fundamentally, what we believe in is that anybody that has the capacity and the desire to continue on with post-secondary education, whether it's at a university or college, should not be prevented from doing so. Our Premier has staked his reputation on that. He has said right from day one that he wants to be known as the Education Premier. I think he's lived up to that so far with all the investments that we've made over the years.